Greetings! Happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. Hope you all had a great weekend. I'm Steve Deace. We're brought to you by our friends over at Patriot Mobile. If you want to make the switch, you can do so now with a free month of service to get you started at the mobile phone service my entire family uses and has now for going on 6 years, and we have not looked back. The outstanding U.S.-based customer service team, all the bells and whistles you get from all the communist corporations, but they don't hate you. It's a great product, and then they also reinvest their profits back into the values that they share with you. Make the switch today. Steve, I can't. I'm locked into a terrible deal with a communist company. Well, they've got contract buyout programs to maybe free you from that prison you're in. All right, go to patriotmobile.com/Steve. Use the code Steve to get started with a free month of service. patriotmobile.com/Steve. Code Steve. That's patriotmobile.com/Steve. Code Steve to get started. All right, coming up today on the program, the return of our friend and colleague, Steve Baker. They tried to kill him, or maybe he has pursued this story so doggedly he darn near killed himself doing it. But he is back. It's his first appearance on the show since he returned from a serious health scare. And now we are getting down to the nitty-gritty details of whether or not we truly have the right person in custody as the J6 pipe bomber. Steve Baker is going to have the latest details on that from the perspective of his investigation. That's coming up at the bottom of the hour. And then next hour, it is your opportunity to ask me anything, questions from our Facebook followers. Todd, do we have some good ones?
We're ready to roll, yeah.
All right, we got some ready to roll ones. Hopefully they're good enough. You can always tell they're good when there's so many of them. We don't have time to get to them all, and we got to roll them over into the overtime as well. That's typically how we gauge just how good the questions are, right? But before we do all of that, of course, we have to get started with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Super Bowl 60. The Seattle Seahawks prevailed 29-13 over the New England Patriots. The game was mostly boring until the final quarter, where 30 of the game's points were scored, but New England never really threatened. The TPUSA halftime show featured Kid Rock, Brantley Gilbert, Lee Brice, and Gabby Barrett on YouTube alone. That halftime show had over 22 million views between the main TPUSA account and Charlie Kirk's account. The organization says the audience peaked at between 5 and 6 million live concurrent viewers on YouTube alone. Most importantly, Kid Rock altered his song Till You Can't and added a final verse that included an explicit gospel presentation. It was entertaining and inspiring, and TPUSA hit it out of the park. In other news, President Trump says talks with Iran in Oman went well on Friday as negotiations continue over Iran's nuclear program. What also continues is the military asset buildups in the region. At least 112 Air Force C-17 Globemaster cargo aircraft have been observed heading to Europe and the Middle East in recent days. Back at home, outrage erupted from the usual soft-headed suspects over a 1-second clip that appeared at the end of a video President Trump shared on Truth Social. Here's the clip in question.
I always tell people the day the Latino, African American, Asian, and other communities realize that they share the same oppressor is the day we start winning. Because we are the majority in this country now. We have the ability to take over this country and to do what is needed for everyone and to make things fair.
Strong clip. That was Texas State Representative Gene Wu.
My own faith, Islam, a religion built upon a narrative of migration. The story of the Hijrah reminds us that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a stranger too, who fled Mecca and was welcomed in Medina. Surah An-Nahl 1642 tells us.
Wrong clip again. That was New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani quoting the Quran to justify the unlimited importation of third world illegal aliens. Good thing people like Russell Moore and John Piper were all over these stories, or not. They both shared posts late last week extremely critical of President Trump for that stupid post nobody's going to remember in 5 days. The Trump administration received a massive legal victory out of the Fifth Circuit on Friday. The court ruled 2-1 that the administration is indeed working within the law by detaining illegal aliens. Activist judges have been ordering the release of illegals over the past year based on fraudulent interpretation of immigration law. Those judges will not be able to do that any longer, meaning the process to detain and deport just got a lot smoother. Moving on, a couple of examples of men stepping up to the plate. We go back to our home state of Iowa. where a guidance counselor in the Atlantic School District allegedly sent inappropriate communications to at least one female teenage student. The parents got together to give the school board a piece of their mind. The school board tried to switch the time and location of their meeting to throw off the parents, but the parents followed through anyways.
That is just fucking disgusting. How dare you say that about my fucking daughter? That she's gonna flirt with some gross 35-year-old
Look at him, Beth.
No, you look at me when I
talk.
talk
Look at him in the eye. Because this is the man I was going to bring to the meeting. That
and
you
you're lucky that I didn't show up.
I should bring all of the parents. Remember? You said that. Why didn't you bring them all?
Why didn't you bring them all? Did you want me to come up there? No, because I would have walked out in cuffs. Because I'm not here with this. You're lucky this man is not in the ground by my hands. And this is your negligence and your bull that you put all these people's kids through. Your head is going to roll. Your job is done. All you motherfuckers. These are our children that we're in here trying to protect. You're going to sit there with that gross look on your face like you didn't do nothing wrong. You.
That's what a dad looks like after his kids had to go through this bullshit.
That's a calm dad.
In Chattanooga, Tennessee, this man showed up to the public library to confront the organizers of a workshop aimed at showing parents how to trans their kids, when the library staff made this incredulous claim.
This is a private event. It's a private event. Yeah. You have to leave. Sorry, guys. Bye.
It's a private
event.
Public library.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a private event. Let's register in advance.
rented today, so...
Right. Yeah. My tax dollars paid for this.
No, you'll have to leave.
No, go get the librarian.
You'll have to leave.
No.
Ticketed event. This is a public
This is
library.
a private event.
What will you tell God when He asks you why you perverted your children? What are you going to... That's what you need to care about. That's what you need a workshop about.
Good on that man for showing up at any rate. And finally, Congressman Tim Burchett on Bad Bunny.
Dude, I wouldn't know if Bad Bunny walked up here and asked me for if he could borrow my cell phone. I really don't know who he is. I used to have a Bad Bunny. I had this Flemish giant rabbit. His name was Flop. He had one ear that flopped over.
Oh, nice.
And I always remembered, and somebody had another Flemish giant and they wanted to breed him. And I said, well, let's go easy on that. So they bring the dadgum thing over. It was Christmas Day. I'll never forget this. And Flop and this other his name was Caramel. I say caramel, that aggravates my wife, and so I keep saying caramel. And so Caramel, we put it in the cage beside it, and they're getting to know each other. Put them together. It's true what they say about rabbits, dude.
Oh.
And, yeah. And my nephew was like, Uncle Tim, what's Flop doing to Caramel? And I go back in the house, dude. It's not my job to give the sex talk here.
Oh my God.
And then about a week later, Flop died of a heart attack. So what do you know? I guess he died doing what he loved.
And that's what happened while we were away.
Oh, gosh. By the way, I saw he was taping that outside the Capitol Hill Club. One of the top 5 meals I've had in my entire life at that Capitol Hill Club. Truly amazing food. Truly. Aaron's Montage brought to you by us. You want to make sure you join us. Don't miss a single episode, not just of us, but all of us here at The Blaze and all of our exclusive content we produce just for you each and every day. Get $20 off if you subscribe now at blazetv.com/Deace. That's blazetv.com/Deace, but you got to use that code Deace to get the massive discount. Comes down to just about $8 a month, about 26 cents a day. blazetv.com/Deace. Code Deace for the big discount. So how Islam spread is migration now. That's a euphemism. Taxing and spending to the hilt is investment, right? That's investment. What else? Reproductive freedom is a murder is reproductive freedom. And how Islam spread throughout the Fertile Crescent is now being referred to as migration. That is interesting. But let's get to the really interesting thing that occurred. And if you guys recall, at least to me, over the weekend anyway, and if you guys recall on Friday during the day script, do you guys remember what our force prediction was at the end of the hour?
The interesting thing about the Super Bowl.
That everybody's going to be talking about the day after. None of us got it right.
Well.
But here we are. Nobody got it right. Nobody said the TPUSA halftime show. Nobody did.
Well, I said that the halftime show.
Yeah, but you didn't say which one.
Well, they're competing for standing in. I mean, they both.
If it's that important to you, I'll let you have to interrupt me. I'll let you have half a point if it's that important to you. Half a point, good?
It was the halftime show.
Okay.
It wasn't the game.
All right, you can have half a point. Okay. The dichotomy here, and I'm not even talking about Kid Rock and Bad Bunny. I'm talking about the entirety of the messaging, whom was being messaged to. And there are numerous meta points to make here. Number one, Turning Point USA is cooked. Turning Point USA is toast. They're done. They're finished by the time the numbers are in. Because, see, now we're hitting the word of mouth phase of all of this. And now we're getting into the phase where everybody went to work today and said, hey, did you see that? Okay. When this is all said and done, I believe it's number 3 or number 2 most streamed events ever. By the time this is all said and done, it might end up being the most streamed event in the history of the internet from a social media standpoint. Since Charlie's martyring, Turning Point USA has produced now perhaps between his memorial and then the final verse of Kid Rock's song, which I'll get to here next. These might end up being the largest introductions / presentations of the gospel in the history of the gospel in terms of singular witnesses to it. They're not only done, folks. They're not only not done. They took on the pop culture Leviathan. The National Football League. And struck a mighty blow for Americana throughout all of that. Did you guys know it had been 32 years since there was a Super Bowl halftime show that prominently featured country music? 32 years. 32 years.
Even that seems longer than I thought it would have been.
32 years. It was the 1994 Super Bowl, 32 years ago.
Who was it?
Travis Tritt, the Judds, and I'm trying to remember who Clint Black. Travis Tritt, the Judge, and Clint Black. That was the last time. I saw Matt Walsh had a stat that since Jay-Z took over managing the Super Bowl halftime show from the NFL in 2019, there's been only one white performer, and it was Eminem. That's been the only white performer that has showed up since 2019. By the way, last year, I went and did some research on this. Last year, 2025, for the first time, country music rivaled hip-hop, at least in North America anyway, in terms of sales and downloads. And of course, this was a country music-themed event. So let's get to the event itself. An incredible moment for Turning Point USA. I mean, that is a well-done, good, and faithful servant's moment. And I texted this to some of my friends there. And I know that, and I'll share with you guys exactly what I texted to some of my friends there this morning. I know that they know this, right? Like I know how proud my mom is of me, but it still is meaningful when I hear it directly from her, right? And I know that they know this, but I think sometimes it's still meaningful to hear this from others. Charlie would just be extremely proud at what was pulled off here. And even more so, the impact of it. And this brings me to Kid Rock's performance because it absolutely is symbiotic with the dads at that event. And I'm going to connect those dots here in a moment. So Kid Rock comes out with his first breakthrough hit off of his debut his debut mass marketing album, a song so old I still remember it. It's literally from another century. And it's very clear that he is lip syncing. And then did you guys notice what happened after that song? There's like a segue. And some guys come out and say, we now want to introduce our brother Bob Ritchie. And now he comes out and he sings a song himself. And then there's the closing line that Aaron mentioned is in that song about dusting off the old book, about a man who is dying for you on a cross and will give you all the second chances you ask for until you can't ask for them anymore. A very powerful line. And the symbolism of that. He comes out, plays the song that elevates him and made him a brand name. From the album that made him a global rock hip-hop star. And then he closes, stripped down, just to his birth name. And the last line that he sings elevates his Lord. Are you following me here with the power of that? One of the things you see in the scriptures quite often is when the Lord saves a man, he gives him a new name or a different name than the one he had before. Simon is now called Peter. Saul is now called Paul. Jacob is now called Israel. Abram is now called Abraham. And one of my poker buddies, hat tipped to Tim, who just texted me. He said, do you think the fact that he lip-synced the old lyrics and then sang the new ones live, do you think there was some testimony where that is concerned? And that part of it that's another layer of this that had not even dawned on me. Pastor Kid Rock is about to send you a whole new batch of people. I hope you are ready for them. And they're going to come looking and sounding like Kid Rock. Your job is to make sure they leave as Bob Ritchie. That, I thought, just spoke to a generation. How many of us start off as Kid Rock? But it's really how we end. And those who tell you it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. No, it's only about the destination. And think about what you want the end of that destination to be. And then reverse engineer the journey from there. That was a powerful cultural moment. Because at the same time, by the way, it's the first Super Bowl halftime show I have watched in 15 years, let alone all the way through. Because at the same time, we have a performance in Spanish that is of a foreign language, but is lewd, crass, craven, vulgar.
If it was in English, the FCC wouldn't have allowed.
Correct. There's no way that would have gotten across the censors. That is America's cold Civil War there. And that brings me to those dads at that event. Here's do not be this guy, okay? The Kid Rock still played that song, and it's got the beginning. I know he didn't sing it, but it's still got some vulgar lyrics. And did you hear how many F-bombs those guys spoke when they went to the school board? Not a single one of those guys is in a sweater vest. Don't do that. Don't. A couple of years ago at our home church, my wife ran into a couple that had been through substance abuse and deliverance from that, from Christ. And they had an elderly lady in their support group that they had been trying to get to come to church for a long time, trying to get her to come to church with them. They finally get her to come. And, my wife works in therapy and Christian therapy and counseling. So she's talking to them before the service and gets to know them and hears their story and meets this elderly woman. And they end up liking Amy so much they sit right in the row ahead of us. And we get into the message, and Pastor Jesse is he's just bringing it, what he does most Sundays. And the crowd is, this is kind of a Pentecostally church, and so the crowd's really into it, rooting him on. And I can just see as the service goes on, this elderly woman is getting more and more into it. Okay? And at kind of the peak of the message, as the crowd is fired up about what Pastor Jesse is saying, she screams out, "F yeah!" And then turns and freezes and realizes what she just did and where she did it. And just was beyond embarrassed. And then my wife did the sweetest thing. She just put her hand on this woman's shoulder and patted her on the shoulder. Just to tell her, it's okay. Now, should we make that woman an elder in the church? Is she ready to lead some kind of women's Bible study because she showed up one weekend? I mean, there clearly needs to be some discipleship here, okay? There needs to be some growth here. But this woman was in a very, very dark place. She had not been to church in many, many years. Is that the moment to scold her and say, in Christian guidebook here, page 8, clause 46AD-12. No, it's not that time. Now, did I say there's never that time? Is that what I said, that there's never that time?
No.
Did I say that it is never time to address our own personal holiness or the holiness of God's assembly? Did I say, is that what I said?
No.
No. I just said that's probably not the time. Well, Steve, what happens if Kid Rock is, hasn't left that lifestyle and stuff behind? Well, number one, that's between him and Christ. Number two, as long as he's not purporting to put himself in a position of leadership in the church, then it's strictly between him and Christ. And if that were to change, then now the rest of the larger body may have a say about stuff like that, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right? But until or unless that occurs, I've got an idea here. Let me throw this one at you. Let's shut the fudge up, and let's let Jesus cook. Let's let Jesus cook. Let him do his thing. Let him do his thing. Thoughts?
It's usually.
Why don't we just let the Lord do his thing? Let's get out of the way. Let the Lord do his thing. How's that? And those men at that church, you could critique their language, or you could recognize there's a spirit there that is sorely lacking. And pastor, elder, that's your target demo right there. I know it won't get you on the cover of Christianity Today. I know it won't, which is now Christianity Seldom, if ever. I know the Gospel Coalition won't write an 800-page piece that maybe that one guy you've been trying to impress since seminary will finally read and realize that, you're a legitimate ministerial brand. But the shofar was sounded in that community. Those men showed up. The shofar was sounded in pop culture. Bob Ritchie showed up. Here's novel idea number 2 I have. Disciple the ones that show up, not the ones that don't. Disciple the ones that showed up, not the ones that don't. Disciple the ones that are there, not the ones that aren't. I'm sure Peter and his ilk, as first century common Jewish fishermen, I am sure they spoke constantly amongst themselves throughout the course of long, sweaty, arduous days. Todd, I'm sure they spoke constantly in these and nows, and whatever the first century Aramaic version was of Queen's English, I'm sure that is how they often spoke to each other constantly.
They were actually picked, at least in part, because they specifically did the opposite.
Correct. You're wondering, where shall I go? That room right there, man, is an entire room of men who are showing you right there in that school board. Because if you take the language away, literally everything, if you take away the handful of F-bombs there, literally everything else is straight out, right out of the Word of God for what a man is supposed to be, correct?
Yeah.
So there's your mold of clay. Start molding it. Not your beta male chauffeur of his Karen spouse, who's not really his wife there in the cul-de-sac, just because they can give you a bigger tithe check. I think the Lord's making it very clear here. There's a lot of sifting that's gone on these last few years. I think the Lord is making it very clear who has responded to the call and who has not. So my two humble suggestions, men, before I turn it over to you two. Number one, get out of the way and let Jesus cook. I am confident the same Jesus that has taken Kid Rock from Bob Ritchie can also manage to smooth out some of Bob's unholier edges. Amen?
Amen.
I think he can handle that. I think he's got it. So get out of the way and let him cook, as the kids say. Here's humble suggestion number two. Disciple the ones that show up for the fight. Disciple them. Stop trying to reach the people that don't show up. And when they do show up, they don't show out. Disciple the ones that show up. Todd and Aaron, your thoughts?
Well, amen, I say to you. I'm glad you spent all of that time on that. It is that important. It is the secular holiday of this nation, and we clearly need to do better. That man with the F-bombs here in Atlantic, Iowa, talking to that woman, that's what's necessary on all fronts in this country. We need to be deadly honest about what that means, though. What side? The dad's side or the woman who brought all those people there? What side is the NFL on? The NFL, it's not ambiguous. It's not accidental. The NFL formally declared war against the culture with that Bad Bunny thing. Look at the lyrics that he was saying in Spanish. It hates you. It hates its audience. A lot of people are saying it doesn't understand it. Oh, it understands them fine. It doesn't think you're ever going to leave. You need to prove them wrong. The NFL is an enemy of the state with what it did. I think that needs to be abundantly clear. Otherwise, we're not being serious.
So you can choose to take the path that Steve just laid out, or you can continue on the path of the John Pipers who could not wait for the opportunity to signal that he is, quote, quasi-woke in making sure that everyone knows he disapproves of a 1-second clip at the end of a Truth Social post that Trump shared. Or Russell Moore, who is a pit viper snake. You could choose that path. You could choose the third wayism, where your winsomeness is just so irresistible to the forces of hell. Make that make sense. Your winsomeness is just so irresistible to the forces of hell that everyone will see how nice and pretty and shiny you are with your wonderful and intact theology. Or you could take that lump of clay and mold it into something other than the blob that I just articulated. That's the path. You know, I think we have tried for a generation plus the third wayism, the winsomeness, and there are times to be winsome for sure.
Sure.
I'm not saying that that's always a bad thing, but I don't know. When I see clips of the halftime show, do you think we need a little more winsomeness or a little more, thus saith the Lord, these are my bleeping kids.
Yep.
They're not your bleeping kids.
Yep.
Bleep you, and your head is going to roll. Do you think we need a little bit more, thus saith the Lord, when we see the halftime show that the NFL forced down everyone's throats yesterday? Or do you think we need a little more winsomeness? I don't know. I think the choice is fairly clear.
I'm sure when the ancient Israelite soldiers were wielding their weapons against the Canaanites in the field of battle, they looked at them and said, you know, when you're winsome, you win some. And I'm sure they all spoke again, the most vaunted of poetic languages, completely deride of anything that might be remotely profane or crass in the heat of battle. I'm sure that they did. More in a moment.
The Steve Deace Show.
All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, powered by Jace Medical. I saw Elon Musk say the other day that if you're using the term misinformation, you're probably the one peddling it, right? I think that's a very astute observation. And I bring that up in the context of Jace guys because that's why they originally came on board with us. Because they were concerned about the misinformation that was being peddled out there in the midst of a so-called pandemic about venerable drugs like hydroxychloroquine, even more so ivermectin. Again, we can all sit here and debate the efficacy of these drugs during the COVID obsession. But what we can't debate is prior to COVID, they were venerable drugs that had been for sale for decades, had saved hundreds of thousands of lives across the world. In fact, just a few years before the pandemic, ivermectin was given the Nobel Prize. And so their position when they came on board with us here at the Blaze was if they can do that to these recent drugs, these recent vintage drugs of success, what can they do to, drugs that are really vintage, the penicillins, the doxycyclines. And so that's the original mindset behind the Jace case. They've grown so much over the last few years now. They have so many different options for you, including ivermectin. In fact, you can get it in multiple different forms, the medical topical, the compound version, the solo version. You can, in fact, expand your Jace case to lots of different customizable options now when you go to jace.com and use my code DACE at checkout for the discount. Right, enter the promo code DACE at checkout for a discount on your order at promo code DACE at jase.com. Promo code DEACE at jase.com. Well, it is good to welcome back our good friend and colleague, Steve Baker, from the land of the almost dead. It is good to see you, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. It is good to be back with you, and it's also good to not be among the land of the dead.
Almost dead, land of the almost dead. So you had a major medical scare over Christmas. I know a lot of our audience and stuff, they know about that here at the Blaze. So give us an update. I mean, how are you doing now, almost 2 months later?
Yeah, I'm having more good days than I am bad days. They just, one of those things where they're adjusting the meds, and every time they do that, I spent a couple of days on the downside. But tomorrow I have another procedure where they're going to poke about 4 holes in me, go in and do some Star Wars modern medicine on my heart, and then we'll see how I feel after that.
Did they ever figure out what the origin of this scare was?
No, and it's interesting because just this morning I got a call from the cardiologist's office and dealing with the question about that is that there is still some remaining question as to whether this was naturally caused. I'm over 60, and men at 60 have these problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other thing, of course, is some of the, let's just say some of the things that I've been working on raised suspicions, enough so that as soon as I was admitted to the hospital on the Sunday before Christmas, Congressman Massey and his wife got on an airplane and flew out to see me at the hospital. And then there were also questions from some of our friends in the intelligence community that wanted to see my records, actually doctors in that community who wanted to look at it. So we've sent that over to them. They say that the likelihood that there was anything untoward or that this was artificially produced is very, very, very low. But they did want somebody actually in the room with me tomorrow in the surgical room, an actual agent of some sort to monitor what was going on. And because of the application process, the procedures for going through the approval of getting that done, that's not going to happen for tomorrow. But I feel good. I actually like my doctor, believe it or not. So I'm ready to roll.
Well, let's get into some of those things you have been working on. I know. All right. Okay. Point blank. Is the right person in custody for the J6 bombing as far as you know, to the best of your knowledge, to the best of your research?
I'm going to say that I am 99.8% sure that they have the wrong person. And that's because we have done a tremendous amount of our own, call it for what it is, our own forensic work. I mean, 2 days before my event, my heart event, I was in D.C. with a tape measure, going to the Democratic National Committee headquarters, going to the Republican National Committee headquarters, to the neighborhood where this young man, Brian Cole Jr., lived, and actually even visiting the site where he had a minor fender bender back in mid 2024, and measuring blocks of concrete and the length of bricks, and doing the kinds of things that you would do if you were in law enforcement, to see if foot sizes line up with what they claim. And I can tell you that they don't line up. And so spending a couple of days doing that actually gave me the beginnings of the, I guess it was the symptoms. I was having a really hard time getting around DC that Friday and Saturday, and then I came home Saturday night, was admitted to the hospital on Sunday. But it was during that time I was doing that work. And then we've done so much more work, Steve, with our video professional, who we refer to as Armitage, and he has found so much inside the video evidence that we've been able to get our hands on, that shows that it's just highly unlikely that this young man was there, and certainly not the person in the hoodie, certainly not in the location that the FBI claims he is. With these cell phone tower pings, we've been able to map out and actually, trace the vectors and the azimuths and all of that of these cell tower pings, and they're not in the right locations. And additionally, the most important finding that we've made is that in the entire area on the evening of January 5th, we've been able to, using Capitol CCTV cameras, to monitor the traffic. We have found 3 cars similar to Brian Cole's car, and 2 of those do not match the Nissan Sentra, 2017 Nissan Sentra package. So, everything comes with a trim package and different wheels, something like 17 different wheels that were offered in that particular year model. And the one car, the blue Nissan Sentra 2017, that we can find with the identical trim package, we know that not by just observation, but we have the VIN number of his car, so we've been able to track that and get it absolutely perfectly correct. And that particular car, which is seen, is over a mile away from where, at the exact moment that the hoodied bomber is walking, the car that matches Brian Cole Jr.'s car is nowhere near, and absolutely impossible to get there in time to do what is claimed that he did.
So you're presenting evidence that in a legal proceeding may cast reasonable doubt on Brian Cole's guilt. He pled guilty, or I'm sorry, he admitted to it at first and then pled not guilty.
Right.
How do you, what's your understanding of that juxtaposition? Was that just simply a legal ploy for a better plea agreement rather than pleading guilty right away? Are you seeing evidence that his attorneys are actually going to fight this now on the merits at trial?
Yeah, first of all, the confession is highly questionable. He was questioned for 2 hours under duress without an attorney present. He is a level 1 autistic young man, severe OCD. Even his mugshot that was taken, they allowed him to have his headphones that he wears. He's compulsively has these headphones on, and they allowed him to wear his headphones in a mugshot. That just never happens when you see police mugshots. And so 2 hours of questioning certainly influence on what they were putting in his mind at the time. And then they took a 20-minute break. When they come back, he puts his head down on the desk and he just starts confessing to everything and basically repeating those things that he had been told for the 2 hours previous. Now, it is extremely common. In fact, it's one of the highest rates of false confessions come from autistic individuals. That's scientific. There's actually a book written on that phenomenon. Then additionally, as far as the legal team is concerned, certainly the not guilty pleas were entered to make sure that that he's protected regardless. Even if he's at that 0.2% of possible guilt, they have to do this in order to make sure everything proceeds as it should under our legal system. But to answer your question specifically, we believe that his legal team is doing the right thing, that they are moving forward with the intent of proving that he is innocent of these charges. And then additionally, while they're going through that, and we're continuing to build our case on the outside, and we're not the only ones that are questioning this. I'll be honest with you, Steve. I have colleagues that are actually in the mainstream media. I'm talking about major mainstream media figures who have told me in private conversation that they're not buying this arrest, that they think that he's a patsy. They think that it's a false arrest. Now, why aren't they going and writing stories and questioning in the manner that we are? They have their own editorial positions that they have to adhere to and what they're allowed to say. And certainly if this falls apart, as we think it will, it also brings back the specter of the whole January 6th narrative as being completely inaccurate to begin with.
How confident are you that Brian Cole can get a fair trial so that the country can get a definitive verdict here on guilt or innocence?
I'll be honest with you. If Brian Cole goes to trial, there's no way a D.C. jury convicts this young man. Not a chance. The reasonable doubt is overwhelming. Additionally, he's a mentally challenged black man. Everybody that asks me this, I give them a couple of examples. In the January 6 trials at large, there were 2 oath keepers that were acquitted at trial. Oath keepers charged with seditious conspiracy, among other things. What do you think the key factor was with both of those oath keepers as compared to the rest of them that were convicted of either multiple charges or even the seditious conspiracy charges and sentenced to 8, 12?
I'm going to guess a lack of discernible evidence that they were even actually at the event. I'm going to guess that's what it was.
No, they had black skin.
Even more craven. Gotcha.
In D.C.
Yeah.
Before a majority black jury.
Well, then if that's the case, then isn't that just our FBI's get out of jail free card here if they don't get a conviction? Well, we tried, we had the right guy, but they just wanted to let the black guy walk. Isn't that what they just roll out there with then?
Well, I think what the DOJ wants, and certainly what the FBI wants, is they don't want this to go to trial. This is why, despite the overwhelming evidence that he's not a flight risk, even the Department of Justice has admitted that Cole is not a flight risk. And they have continued to fight and claim that he's a danger to society, which of course, even his own neighbors, some of whom we have, myself have interviewed, they do not consider him a danger. They do not believe that he's the guilty party. And he's shown no dangerous activity whatsoever in the 5 years since January 6th. And so they continue to keep him in pretrial confinement, which has got to be absolutely horrifically mentally challenging for this young man who is used to a routine. I mean, I interviewed the 7-Eleven owner at the 7-Eleven that's at the entrance to their neighborhood, which he walked to an average of twice a day. The owner of that 7-Eleven, the franchise owner I spoke to, he had seen that kid for 13 years, and he himself saw him an average of 2 to 3 times per week for 13 years. The kid comes in every single day. He gets 2 Coca-Colas and a slice of pizza for 13 years every day. This is a kid of habit, and to take him out of that has to be almost near torture because he's being held in isolation. He's certainly not in the general population. He's not interacting with anybody else. And as a result of that, they're trying to drive him and drive the family into some sort of plea deal because they do not want this to go to trial.
So before you came on, Steve, we've got about 3 minutes here. Before you came on, I asked Grok to analyze the evidence against Brian Cole and discern whether or not it was possible for there to be reasonable doubt. And Grok came back noting that there's gaps in explosive evidence. There's no documented proof, according to Grok, that Cole purchased black powder or potassium nitrate, which would be needed to make these bombs explode. That there's no DNA or fingerprint matches mentioned in any of the public filings against Brian Cole, and that he has absolutely no prior criminal record. And as you pointed out, the autism angle as well. Okay, and there's more. I'm just giving you, we're short of time, but and the final verdict is that yes, this would seem to indicate the possibility, Grok says, of reasonable doubt of Brian Cole's guilt. Last thing, your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Additionally, as Armitage likes to say, is that Brian Cole's entire body is exculpatory. Nothing about him matches that of the hoodie bomber. The most significant issue, not only the size issues as you compare the photos of the hooded bomber to Brian Cole, but if you'll notice, there's one key set of photographs we have from the fender bender of this traffic accident that Brian has to hold his phone right here, about 8 inches from his face in order to see it. But the hooded bomber, when he or she sits down at the DNC bench that night for the first time, holds and looks at the phone at night in their lap. And I have shown that to my own ophthalmologist recently, just a few weeks ago, and said, look at this photo. Are they the same person? And she was like, I would never make that judgment without examining them. But somebody at that age, at 25, it's not very likely, considering the severe glasses that he wears and how close he has to read otherwise, that it's the same person as the person sitting at the bench at night looking at the phone 2 feet away from their eyes.
It's good to have you back, my friend.
Good to be back, Steve.
All right. Keep us posted, okay?
Will do. Thank you.
You bet. God bless. Gentlemen, what do you think?
I've said on a couple of occasions, without going into detail, that I think this Brian Cole story is interesting. I think I've also said on occasion, since this story broke, that this might be the angriest I have been at any singular story involving this FBI or DOJ. Again, not going into details. Now you know why. And then you look at the timing as well. And I'll just leave it there. The timing of his arrest, let's just call that interesting as well.
The fact that Steve Baker's name is not known in the same breath as like Woodward and Bernstein should make you as mad as that Atlantic dad throwing a bunch of F-bombs at the ridiculous harpy who's transing the kids there. It should make you that mad because he's a dude. And we owe him a great debt.
We come back. You asked the questions. We'll see if I have any answers. Your chance to ask me anything is next. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Aaron McIntyre and Todd Erzin. I'm Steve Deace. We're brought to you by our friends over at Raycon. You want to use their essential open earbuds. They will completely change how you work out. They don't block out everything around you, so you can still stay aware when you're running, lifting, walking outside, but you do so without sacrificing clear, motivating sound for your music or podcasts. They stay crisp and you stay focused and safe. Right now is the perfect time to grab them. They're 15% off. Regular earbuds try to block out everything. So maybe you can't hear a car honking, someone calling your name. But these Raycons, they sit just outside the ear canal, so you still get really clear sound, but you can actually hear what's happening around you as well. All right, just another reason why Raycon has over 3 million satisfied customers. The sound quality, just as good as the way more expensive brands as well. They're half the price here, right? So, and they come with a 30-day guarantee that you're probably not going to need, if we're being honest. But don't take it from me, take it from my kids, because they gank my Raycons every time a new set comes in the mail. The Essential Open Earbuds, they're here to help you go for the gold. So go to buyraycon, RAYCON, buyraycon.com/Steve to get 15% off. I mean, Steve Open, I should say. Buyraycon.com/Steve Open. Buyraycon.com/Steve Open. You'll get 15% off at buyraycon.com/Steve Open. All right. You guys can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox by emailing us, steve@stevedeace.com, DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube. And then if you're a podcast listener, make sure you hit subscribe or Apple iTunes, click follow. That way you're going to know for sure you're never going to miss a single episode right there in your podcast feed. You can also leave us a 5-star review, as tens of thousands of you have, and we appreciate each and every one of those. Just as now, we appreciate all the questions you submitted for us via our Facebook page. For this week's Ask Me Anything, Todd, how are we looking overall, since you are the curator of said questions?
Well, there was close to 100 responses, I think. So, we whittled it down. There should be about 15 of them in there. And, as usual, they're eclectic, and a lot of people, they just go where they want to go, man.
Well, let's go where you want to go. We'll get through as many of these as we can. What remains, we'll tackle those in the overtime for subscribers. Aaron, fire away.
Let's go to Emily Aylward White, who asks, should Olympic athletes using the stage as their personal platform be allowed to represent the United States?
I think this largely comes down to whether or not you agree with what they are saying. And I would even say in past eras, when we still had an intact social compact, I'm not offended if they share views that are different from mine. And I think at times we could use that pressure valve release. One of the reasons your founders gave you elections is so that we wouldn't kill each other over these differences, so that people wouldn't be the casualties, ideas and political outcomes would be. So I do think with a healthy, intact social compact, it is good to have pressure release valves, and you love your neighbor as you love yourself. And as long as no one's offended in the other direction, when you say something like, hey, I love being an American, and 100% I think we ought to have secure borders, then if another athlete on the same team has a different position, you guys can come together under the flag and do your best for your country. Ideally, we'd be okay with stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have an intact social compact?
No.
No. Is there, if indeed you took the other viewpoints, would the other side of said viewpoint offer you the accommodation that I just mentioned? Would it do so?
Probably not.
Would it try to cancel you almost immediately? Yes. Would you be branded as the worst of society, a literal Nazi within 24 hours? Of course. So therefore, since we don't have an intact social compact, and we're not capable of handling the level of freedom and even disagreement that freedom belies and reveals, then I think we are better off just having a blanket thing. You're here to promote the United States of America. You're welcome to say whatever you want, except for the 2 weeks here that we're having the games of the whatever Olympiad. So no social media post, nothing of that nature. You're here in order to rally as many people as possible within our own country to your exploits. And then what you want to do before or what you want to say after you've successfully done so, that's entirely up to you, and that's on your time and on your dime. But it's just very clear that the social compact is broken. The double standards are overwhelming. And so, yeah, at this point, I just think there ought to just be a blanket ban of such things. Thoughts on that answer?
It is sufficiently nuanced to have a knee-jerk reaction to and I've seen some of these. They're just so dumb, the responses. It's just, which is, even a guy with 40 years on these guys, it's like Steve Kerr level, just dumb and unnecessary. I think if I was in the Olympics and Biden was president and I got a question, would I want the opportunity to say something if I thought it needed to be said? Sure. But also I want these guys to have some real tactical thoughtfulness, some discretion about. See, they're not thinking about this moment. They have just been drinking moron Kool-Aid for so long.
I mean, they're literally saying, I'm not proud,
Yeah.
or I have mixed feelings about wearing this uniform. To me, the first salvo of this was the Olympics I think it was the 2004 Olympics during the Iraq War. And Bill Martin, former athletic director of the University of Michigan, by the way, was the head of the USOC and was telling Olympians to tone down their patriotism because of how the rest of the world felt about the Iraq War. Now, listen, plenty of Americans, including this guy, have real misgivings now about the entirety of the Iraq War, given what we know now. Did we know those things during the 2004 Olympics?
No.
No. At the critical mass of information we currently have? No. Right? So that was being done, not to mention that was an election year, and that was the last time we had a president even win the popular vote on our side until this last election. So, I mean, that was just done strictly for political reasons. It wasn't for no other reason whatsoever. And I am fine letting people have vehicles for their own beliefs. But when it comes to the idea that, well, that means therefore I'm not proud, because let me tell you something. I mean, I didn't have a flag out in front of my house like a single July 4th the last few years, but my federal government was coming after me harder than I thought that that Russia would. Right now, last year, we're in charge now. Flag went back out there for the 4th of July. But see, that reinforces my central point. Why did this happen? The social compact is broken. And I just think at that point, if you're not capable of having just a banal, unifying message, aren't puppies cute? Should we not kick kitties? You see what I'm saying? If you can't just stick to basic unifying principles, then you just should not be given a platform on Team USA. Because I'm just going to tell you right now, everybody that spoke out over the weekend, I mean, I think I tweeted at every single one of these people. I hope you all lose. And not only do I hope you lose, frankly, I hope Russia beat you. I'll be rooting for Russia against you just to prove a point.
See, what I don't believe, whether it's today, yes, it's been a long time now where everybody on the left, I just don't believe that they're ever proud to be an American. That's my problem.
Well, there's that too.
If you're proud to be an American, but, on this, not so much, I've got some problems. Hey, it's hard for us to say a country that promotes the First Amendment at the Olympics to say you don't get to have your say. But all these people, they're just constantly America haters. Okay, go wear another flag then. That's what you should do.
Okay, next question.
Next, we go to Stephen Hall, who asks, for younger Christians who genuinely want to engage culture and politics faithfully but don't want to become angry, burned out, or consumed by it, what practices or guardrails have helped you stay grounded over the years?
Excellent question, by the way, because this is an ongoing temptation. And, when Todd talks about the uniqueness of me, that I can still indulge in some of these frivolous pursuits of American pop culture, but not have them get in the way of the priorities that I'm called to as a man and a husband and a father. Those are the things that I do. Okay. I mean, when I'm not in the arena, in my free time, unless, like Todd or Aaron come to me and say, you have to listen to this, or someone that I'm very close to around the country says, hey, I need you to listen to this. Barring that, if I'm not in the arena or prepping to be in the arena, I get as far away from this content as I possibly can. So I don't drown in it. I don't become consumed by it, that it doesn't overwhelm me. So yeah, I mean, but those are where the priorities matter. Okay. I mean, the reason why my wife doesn't care that last night she wanted to go to bed early and I stayed up for another couple hours playing, PGA Tour golf, is because my wife also knows I worked like 70 hours last week. So she's not offended that I was playing PGA Tour golf at 10 o'clock last night. So I do think you have got to have frivolous pursuits in your life. And frivolous in terms of they're not specifically mission oriented. You know? Now, stuff could come out of it. Like maybe you like, my wife loves putting Legos together. Maybe you like doing that. There's nothing specific mission oriented until one day your kid or grandkid comes in and says, hey, Pops, what you doing? And can I do it with you? Then maybe it's a little more mission oriented, But you need those things in your life. You do. But here's the thing. They are leisure pursuits after you are completed successfully or to the best of your ability what your priorities are. So you have to have your priorities in your closed hand and your pursuits are in your open hand. And you have to close the closed hand. You have to make sure that's closed first. But once you do that, I would 100% urge you to have frivolous pursuits. Just be a guy named Todd, a guy named Aaron, a guy named Steve, a guy named Jerry, a guy named whatever your name is, or gal, all right? I think it is vitally important to have those things as margin in your life in some places so you do not get consumed by it, provided you understand that priorities come first and then the pursuits come after.
Next, we go to LV Towers, who says, about a week ago, Jeremy Boring, that's former Daily Wire Grand Poobah, about a week ago, Jeremy Boring spoke with the Trigonometry hosts and said that Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Marjorie Taylor Greene were engaging in an actual political project to create a new American majority based on left-wing economic populism and right-wing social populism. Do you agree?
So I didn't hear that interview. Just going back to the last one. Unless someone says, you've got to hear this, when I'm done, I'm out. Okay? So I didn't hear that interview, and I don't know what the Trigonometry podcast is, but that is a cool name for a podcast, by the way. So I cannot speak, and I don't know Jeremy very well. I've met him a couple times in passing. They were very pleasant, but I don't know him very well, and I'm not really privy to the situation because I don't work at Daily Wire, what really went on there. So I can't speak to that interview or him, but I can speak to the broader general question you asked. Okay. Let me say this. Prior to this current era, I have been saying for years on this show that, well, especially before the Trump era, the voter that the Republican Party establishment consultant became obsessed with turning out did not largely exist in critical masses. And you guys have heard me, you especially because you've been here longer than Aaron, you've heard me say this, that this idea that the average voter, that the pre-Trump era GOP establishment consultant was obsessed with, somebody who didn't care whatsoever about what the moral conditions of the culture was, but wanted economic fiscal conservatism, that voter doesn't exist in any critical mass. And in fact, the data shows the opposite is true. That if we're just doing cold hard, have nothing but a platform, have nothing of prophetic significance at all, don't try to move the election populace, don't just be a reflection of who the voters are. You see what I'm trying to say? Like, you're not trying to win an argument. You're just nothing but win an election. You're doing nothing other than that. And just give me the cold, hardcore numbers. Okay? Just give me those cold, hardcore numbers, and I will reflect. I'll give a platform that reflects back to those people the image of what they want without any moral standing whatsoever. There are way more voters. Way more. I've said this for well over a decade, pre even the emergence of Trump. There are way more voters who want government to bail them out economically with some form of moral certainty and social order. Way more. I mean, how many times do you hear me say that in the pre-Trump era on this show? We talked about, I would walk through this data. I'd walk people through polling, exit polling, to demonstrate the very voter the Republican Party pre-Trump era consultant was obsessed with does not exist. Do you guys remember how I used to ask the question a lot on the show? Show me the composite of the voter who responds to this message. You remember I used to ask that all the time? This voter didn't exist. It does not exist. This voter who said, by all means, I want the whole country to smell like pot. I want my kids medically kidnapped to be transed. I want open borders, okay? But just give that to me with low taxes if you don't mind. That voter doesn't exist in any critical mass at all. It does not. Now, the voter that does exist in great critical mass is the voter that wants government to bail them out when they can't do it themselves, while also ensuring and protecting some form of social moral order to some varying degree. So right away, I would challenge this premise by saying this trend line existed in the electorate before before we knew what a Marjorie Taylor Greene was, before we knew who a Steve Bannon was, and before this current iteration of populist Tucker Carlson. Because during that era when I was pointing this out, Tucker would have been on MSNBC or CNN in a bow tie, claiming people like me are the reasons why we keep losing elections by pointing out that this is actually where the electorate was. That's the great irony of this. Okay? So this is not some psyop of some, populist insurgency. This trend line already existed. So I think we need to understand that first. Secondly, I don't think most Americans know what economic conservatism is. And I can never get the Chesterton quote right about Christianity. Something like rarely, often claimed and rarely tried, something like that, right? Okay. Sure. But Aaron, in your lifetime, when has this been, when's the Republican Party really pursued your understanding of economic conservatism? Just go.
February 31st every year.
Exactly. Okay. I mean, I don't even know when this is. I don't. I mean, Aaron's life began with George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, violating his read my lips, no news taxes pledge. All right. And then it went to George W. Bush and Karl Rove deciding America wanted guns and butter. By the way, what's guns and butter? Exactly what I just described. Mass governments. Who was the first Republican to actually give us that's the great irony of the Bush era consultants trying to find the low government, no moral standing voter, is that's not even how they even won themselves. George W. Bush was the biggest spending president in American history until his successor, Obama, and then won the 2004 re-election on moral values. So again, this trend line predates Trump. It predates Trump. I'm not, except for, like the first term of the Reagan era, when we actually tried Art Laffer supply side economics and at least dipped our toes in the water of what Milton Friedman said for 30 years prior to Reagan, I don't even know what economic conservatism even looks like. And neither does the rest of the country, by and large. Has no clue what it is. No clue.
Oh, I guarantee you a lot of people are mad about Big Pharma now after COVID. We're all on board with W. Bush and Medicare Part D. And
correct.
That's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
But all kinds of people all this time knew what a woman was, knew what a border was. See what I'm saying? Okay. So this trend line does not start from these people. And I say that as someone that thinks Marjorie Taylor Greene is certifiably crazy. I've always thought it. My edict from this show was from the very beginning of her emergence. Go back. We've talked more about Marjorie Taylor Greene in the last year than we did the previous 5. Why? Because I'm a big believer you run from crazy women. That's why. I had a feeling this heel turn was coming the entire time. I just wasn't sure how long it was going to take. Well, now we're here. And I say this as someone who's been on Steve Bannon's show once while he was in prison. It's when my buddy Chip Roy guest hosted, and his staff edited me out of the show so it didn't show up in the archived version. I've never met the guy once in my life. Don't know him. So I don't really have a personal stake in relationships with any of these people, and I'm still waiting for someone to give me a credible reason why Steve Bannon keeps showing up in the Epstein files and keeps trying to do PR work for Jeffrey Epstein in the year 2018 of our Lord. No one's given that to me yet. But I think if you're concerned about this trend line, you've got to be honest about where it comes from and not just, anoint Goldensteins as scapegoat boogeymen rather than listening to the very voters you're trying to reach. You see what I'm trying to say? And whether it's Ben Shapiro or Dr. Oz saying Well, just work longer and spend less time retiring so we can pay off the debt from all the money of yours we stole. Follow that up with, let them eat cake, I guess. Now, I'm a graduate of the Milton Friedman School of Economics. When I got into this business 20 years ago, that's what I thought I would be promoting. So I'd love to give that a shot. I just don't know when en masse we have demonstrated this to the American people. There have been some places, Florida, for example, the last 8 years, where it's been shown on a micro level, but on a macro level, when has this even happened? I hate Mitch McConnell with the heat of 1,000 suns, but he's right when he says no one ever loses an election by spending too much money. He's correct. So I think before we come up with the scapegoats for this trend line, we have to understand that the American people were bought in on this trend line before the people that you specifically cited in that note were ever brands or anybody cared, or when Tucker Carlson sounded, in a bow tie a lot like Ben Shapiro. Any more thoughts on that?
No, I think that's solid food.
And now we're in a position where, frankly, the number one thing I need from government right now is to weaponize against my enemies, so I can have these debates later on.
Back then during this debate, I was in the Des Moines Register newsroom, and I was conceding the point that you're making to all of my liberal colleagues about because obviously I was against big pharma before COVID came along, and back then I was telling most Republicans, most conservatives don't have the stomach to fight against Medicare Part D. They're drug addicts before they're fiscal.
Medicare Part D was the biggest government program in American history at the time, bigger than the entire New Deal.
Yeah.
All right, bigger than the Great Society. It was until Obama came along. It was the single biggest government program in American history. Medicare Part D was.
Yeah, we've had no shot on this front for quite a long time.
Correct. Yeah.
Next, we go to Patrick. As someone from Virginia disgusted by the current state of the legislature, what would be your recommendation as a place to start considering to help change the trajectory of Virginia in light of what you were able to help do in Iowa about 15 years ago? For context, I live in a suburb of Richmond where my delegate recently flipped from R to D, but at a county level, my representation is pretty much Republican for both Board of Supervisors and School Board, and I'm expecting the birth of my first son in a few days. Congratulations, Patrick.
Yeah, congratulations on that. Don't bury the lead. That's the most important thing you said right there. Number one, it is very possible that given the rate Democrats are operating at in your state, your Commonwealth, you guys won't be able to do what we did here. It's possible. And see, now you're beginning to see why 10 years ago I'd have spent 3 days on why the hell is Trump tweeting that? What are we doing? 10 years later, I'm like, no, I'm just not surrendering my country to gay race communists because, a 78-year-old man still thinks he's in the 6th grade and can't watch a video all the way through before he shares it on the largest social media account in planetary history. I'm sorry. The devil has a loaded automatic weapon at my soul. I just don't have time for these tertiary issues. I just don't. And neither does anybody else, frankly. Because if we and this is the first time in my whole career the elections now are basically just binary and we're voting to survive. I mean, how many shows did I do decrying that entire thing for years?
Lots.
But since nobody listened to me back then, we're now and we didn't get involved en masse in these primaries as I was demanding. We're now in the position where that is where we are. So I can continue to do an imaginary show, and I won't have a bunch of non-cons with gators in their bios, okay, assaulting me for being a grifty sellout every day on X, okay, in my replies. But I'll also be surrendering the country to communists for my kids and my grandkids to take it from here. So I guess I'll put up with a non-con gator bio person's, smearing of my character rather than just surrendering the country to gay race communists before my children and grandkids have a shot. Thoughts on that choice? There's a binary choice for you. This is where we are. The Democratic Party is a demonic construct if you give them a foothold of power anywhere. Why do you think I thought about running for governor in my state myself? Why do you think when I discerned I didn't think God was calling me to do that? I got involved with Adam Steen before he even started running to get him prepped to run. Why? Because of this. The Democratic Party is, if you give a mouse a cookie, incarnate. And so it is quite possible I hate to tell you this. You're better off asking me for tips of where to move to. Now, that being said, there are some things you guys are going to need. A statewide media presence. In Iowa, we had that. Moi. Okay? You need a statewide media presence where somebody who's outside the system and doesn't care has built enough of a brand and can get around the system and reach a critical mass of voters that you otherwise would never be able to reach or raise the money for. That's what my show did. That's the number one contribution my show made in turning Iowa red. You need an organization that is as well funded and organized and effective as Bob Vander Plaats's organization is. So then you can take those voters tuning into shows like mine and turn them out at the polls. Do you have that in your state? Without those two things, you're done. You're done. Because you're just going to lose the messaging battle. And your suburban neighbors who just want comfort, they're the definition of normie. As long as I get comfort, no matter which ideological direction provides it, I'll sign up for that. They're all going to go blue. So you're at a critical mass in your commonwealth. I would say you'll find out in the next 12 to 18 months whether you should raise your children there or not. Barring you have a specific community that, you essentially have just made so red you can insulate it from the larger body politic, but that's probably not going to be a suburb of Richmond if we're all being honest. Probably going to be a way more rural area. Agreed?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
maybe the only suburb is Lynchburg. That might be your only safe suburb. The suburbs of Lynchburg where Liberty is. All right? I promise you it won't be a suburb of Richmond. I can promise you that. You're going to be surrounded by a bunch of white Karens who are going to be convinced that the black folks in Richmond still don't even realize how oppressed they truly are. All right? They're also going to be anxious to die by ICE agent for the cause. That's way more likely to happen in a suburb of Richmond than what I'm talking about. I know this is not what anybody having a kid wants to hear, but I'm your dad. If you want your mom to tell you you can do anything you have your heart on, go ask her. Your dad's job is to tell you what's real and true. And so you ask me, I'm a dad, that's what I'm telling you. In the next 12 to 18 months, you're going to find out whether it's way more likely you're going to find out you have to raise your kids somewhere else. Then you can save that place. At the rate that they are moving, they're criminalizing your abilities to stop them from doing what they're doing to you. That's where we are. And that's why I'm not getting compensated anything. In devoting time I don't have to my own home state. Because I'm looking at what's happening in places like yours. Any quick thoughts on that?
That guy who was asking about burnout a couple submissions ago? Sorry, in Virginia, even with one kid, you're going to have to get, wherever that line is, you're going to have to come right up to it because it's a war.
Yeah, I would say if you cannot move, study the doctrine of the lesser magistrate. The left didn't want to talk about that during COVID. They've been talking about it in places like Minnesota. Oh, we've got to get the sheriffs to gum up the works of what ICE is trying to do. Use that for good if you can't leave in your own locality.
We'll come back. More of your questions in a moment. Stay tuned.
The Steve Deace.
All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, powered by Relief Factor. If chronic pain is a problem for you, we may have the solution, emphasis on may. But there's at least a 70% chance that may will realize itself because over the years, about 1 million people have tried the 3-week quick start from Relief Factor. 70% of them saw such good results that they've stuck with the product long term. What is it? It's a drug-free supplement, but created by physicians who can prescribe drugs, who wanted to go after the real reason that you're facing those manifestations of chronic pain, like lingering stiffness, achiness, soreness. The real reason, often too much inflammation in the joint. So instead of another painkiller, what if we went after the inflammation killer instead? That's what Relief Factor is. And it costs you just $20 to see if you're one of those 70% that sees the results that you're looking for. So just $20 to try the 3-week quick start at relieffactor.com. Head to relieffactor.com for $20 to the 3-week quick start. See if you don't see a difference in your pain in 3 weeks or less at relieffactor.com. All right, let's continue. More Ask Me Anything from our Facebook following. Aaron.
All right, we'll go to Kent Miller, who says, if there isn't a biblical concept of people, place, and covenant relationships, then how does the application of civil prudence become scalable?
Great
What
question.
degree of maturity and agreement must a whole level of society reach before any biblical wisdom can be implemented? And what is that level of society? I ask this because there seems to be a tendency for influencer Christians to cancel or gatekeep those who apply anything which may potentially hinder the perceived favorability of Christianity throughout all of Western culture. Should we as Christians be having such an all-or-nothing approach to truth, or does the human condition require much smaller circles of community and belonging?
This is an extremely smart question. So you're going to hate my answer. It's Kent, right?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Kent, the answer to your question is nobody knows. And we have to start there. We don't know.
This is your Nate Bargatze bit here.
Sometimes a critical mass is a group of Puritans settle in a Dutch colony to escape the Church of England, and they're surrounded by a bunch of non-puritanical Protestants or Catholics. And they're just there so they don't get murdered by the King of England. And they just start living out their teachings to the point that it's so effective that these other non-Puritan Protestants and Catholics start coming to them and saying, what do you have going on in your community? We want some of that. Show us your ways. Sometimes it's just that. Sometimes it's 110 people in the upper room, and 40 days after their Lord is crucified, they get the Holy Spirit. And then about 3 centuries later, they end up doing what no army of antiquity was able to do and conquer up until that point anyway, and they conquer the Roman Empire. Sometimes it's, we just had a Reformation, and we're printing the Bibles in all these languages, including English, and we're sending the Word of God everywhere. We're sending out more missionaries than we did probably until the earliest eras, the post-apostolic earliest eras of Catholicism. So you're looking at like 1,000 years almost. And there's just a mass global revival of Christianity. And that includes many of these, they're all 13 of these colonies that are all founded by some vestige of Christianity. I mean, I gave you scenarios where a small band of people multiplied over centuries. Another small band of people made an impact in a singular era, or mass multiplication, globally across much of Western civilization spawns an American Revolution. We don't know. It's not D. James Kennedy used to say, the one thing you'll never find in the Bible is an evangelism plan. All right. So there's not, it's a really smart question, really smart. But the kingdom operates under different math and principles than what our understanding of scalable is. For example, God only does multiplication and division. We tend to think only in terms of addition and subtraction. And so we don't know is the answer to your question. I mean, the math of the math of the scriptures: one plants, another waters, God gives the increase. Multiplication. He doubled it up, then God doubles it from there, and doubles it from there, and doubles it from there. What we do know is we're not there right now. We don't know where there is. We just know we're not there right now. Okay? It's not by their math you will know them, by their cultural algorithmic formula success you will know them, but by their fruit you will know them. If we had an adequate amount of fruit displayed by believers in our society, we would have a different society, correct?
Yes.
And so since we don't have that right now, then we don't know where there is, okay? We just know we're not there. So you're asking the right questions, you're thinking the right way. But I think you need to look for answers that are from a kingdom, not of this, the kind in our human wisdom, your questions are brilliant. But I think you have to understand we're dealing with cosmic math that transcends even as smart as your human questions are. All right? I mean, for example, you could be raising the next Billy Graham or about to be. You don't even know that. You don't even know. And maybe you'll be dead and your son will be, the revivalist of his generation. You won't even know that. Charlie's parents didn't know that. You won't even know. Won't have a clue. You could be raising Esther or Joan of Arc. Don't know. We don't know. What we do know that we are to do, okay, is to stay on the narrow road and seek to become more Christ-like until one day we hear, well done, good and faithful servant. That's all we know. And the entirety of the Bible demonstrates that, and much of the epistles of the New Testament are devised to help us get to that goal. What the critical mass looks like then that overturns, societal structures and institutions as we've seen Christianity do in the past. It can be small and parochial, like the Puritans getting sanctuary in a Dutch colony. It can be global and cataclysmic, like what we saw in the Reformation. It can be steadily and go for centuries, like from the apostles to the time of Constantine. We don't know. Thoughts on that answer? We just know we're not there yet. That's why we have the country we have.
I mean, saying it's messy is the most honest answer, and you gave multiple historical examples. My favorite, of course, as a Catholic, but example of what you're talking about is Calvin himself. I mean, total depravity for reformer. He also tried to create a Christian utopia in Geneva. And
mixed results, we'll say.
Mixed results, including telling him to hey, John, nice try, get the heck out of here now.
Yeah.
So it's tough. And that's his failures, whatever they were, plus his good intentions, and now the guy next to him and the woman next to him, and all of them coming together, doing that same dance of total depravity and wanting to shoot for their version of a Christian utopia. And yeah, that's atoms upon atoms upon atoms.
I mean,
don't forget you're a sinner. That's a
correct
part of this.
Yeah, we don't have enough people yet that, and I don't know what enough is because I'm not God. I don't know what his math is, but we don't have enough people yet that have not internalized God is God and I am not him. All right. Because what God could do is just hook those guys up at that school board thing we saw in Aaron's montage, hook those guys up with the right pastor, and before you know it, 50 years from now, we're looking back at this like, this was, Luther nailing 95 Theses to a wall, or Patrick showing up in Ireland. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know. We just know we're not there yet, because if we were, we wouldn't have the culture around us that we do.
Next, we will go to Christopher Feltz, who says, without a doubt, if the Democrats take back power, absolute power, they will come for those in the media who supported Trump. Do you or any of you have backup plans for what is likely coming? Do you know of any contingency plans being talked about behind the scenes?
Yes and no. I mean, ultimately, we have martyrs because you can have all the backup plans you want, but death comes for us all, and if it's your time, it's your time. So
the backup plan really is everything you already just said about keeping Iowa red and
correct
and fighting for Adam Steen.
That's why I'm so invested in this, as if I was on the ballot, for example. Yeah, that's why. Because the backup plan is, do we have enough red states as a bulwark? And if we don't, do we have enough red communities as a bulwark? And if we don't, well, then it doesn't matter what backup plan you have, we're toast. I would argue the amount of time and energy I've given this gubernatorial race already since last August, and even for months before that, when I was trying to discern whether I thought the Lord was calling me to run or not, I would argue that that's me already activating a backup plan. The other backup plan I have is that ultimately I am uncancelable. I own everything. There may be platforms that are allowing you to access my stuff now that may not be willing to do it later. Okay? But ultimately, I own everything. That what it would take to silence me would either be, God exercising discipline because I deserve it, or the kind of cataclysmic, historical level stuff of censorship that has us next stop, pick your train car kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of instituted my own backup plan by not working for anybody else and owning everything all these years.
Next, we go to Eric, who says, I think this is a fascinating question, is Maha compatible with Midwestern agriculture?
Yeah.
Next question.
It's going to have to be, will be my answer.
Yeah.
Okay. It's going to have to be. And that means getting to that place, both sides are going to end up taking some L's. But to some extent, it's going to have to be. We have other reasons why, for example, on the Midwestern agriculture side. And I think despite being a guy from Iowa, you haven't seen me over all these years shilling for Iowa interest and things of that nature all these years. I haven't, used this thing as a platform to do that on a frequent basis, have I?
No.
But we have geopolitical reasons why you want Midwestern agriculture to be strong, aside from just market forces. I mean, something were to tell me, if you're concerned about what Midwestern agriculture is putting in your food, what do you think the Chinese will put in it? Thoughts? See what I'm trying to say here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there are some strategic reasons why you, on the Maha side, you're probably going to have to learn to bend a little bit. And there are certainly, emerging reasons why the Midwestern agriculture side is going to have to bend, maybe quite a bit to some degree. We have to answer questions like, why are there way more ingredients in our food when I can buy this, a Cheez-It in Canada that doesn't have all those various ingredients? What's the rational explanation for that? That process will be messy and it will be sloppy. It will probably be generational, but it will also be necessary, I would say. And I also will say this, we should hope our way of life survives to the point that we are permitted the luxury of fully exploring this tension point. Because that's not a guarantee. What I just said makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
This is a necessary national discussion and dialogue. I just saw the ad Mike Tyson just did, for example. This is a necessary or discussion and dialogue for sure. But it's also one that will not be settled in a decade or two. And so you should hope that we are permitted the luxury of seeing how it ultimately resolves, because that means the other questions, we won them enough that we got to last that long to have this fight too internally.
And it also has a lot to do with the that ratio of big spending versus morality.
Mm-hmm.
It does have something to do with this. The American consumer, at what they want their plate to look like on a regular basis. I mean, we're talking about, this relationship goes way outside of just having like two entities, a farmer and a Maha person at the table. You start thinking about this, you're talking about fast food. The time.
Listen, I'm used to my Cheetos being orange.
Yes.
What do you mean? What if there's no color to them? How do is there even any cheese on it? That is a generational kind of a conditioning that will take a minute or two to unpack that.
For sure.
Next, we go to Jeffrey Otto, who says, you've repeatedly stated that we need to support the Republican Party, even though they as a whole have shown to be ineffective and not supporting the issues or causes that we as believers have told them we want. Coming from a biblical worldview, where do you see this approach support in Scripture? Where does God say to go with the lesser of two evils?
Number one, God does not say to go with the lesser of two evils. And the lesser of two evils doesn't really largely exist. And this is why I think God doesn't say it. Because literally everything is the lesser of two evils. Everything not named Jesus Christ is the lesser of two evils, because we're all sinners. We're all evil. And by what standard would we judge which evil is lesser than the others? What the Bible calls us to is holiness, not a sliding scale of morality. So on the first end, if your conscience is, this system is too far gone, I cannot engage it without sullying my witness, you know what my answer to you is? Then you should not do so. You should not. I think the chapters of Romans we just went through are very applicable here. I don't think I don't think you're any more holy or more pious than those of us who have not reached that conclusion yet. So I'm not here to, but here's the problem. A lot of you think you are.
Can I add something, interject? I know we're coming up to the end of the hour here, using two recent examples. Number one, House Speaker Mike Johnson, I don't know if you saw this, unveiled a wonderful and really spot-on hermeneutic for why every single believing person should care about border security and immigration laws.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful hermeneutic. Do I think somebody like Mike Johnson is always going to 100% follow through on that hermeneutic? No. On the other side of the ledger last week, we had a Senate candidate in Texas doing some sort of a hermeneutic on why God wants you to abort babies based on some like a total misreading of the text of the Virgin Mary. Those are your options. You have an objectively good standard by which you can judge one political party, that's the Mike Johnson case, or you have an evil example that you know the other side is going to follow through on. There's maybe a little bit finer point there.
Especially given the end of the show. Go hard, Romans 8:28.